Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Shailesh Pratap Singh from Banaras Hindu University, and I am going to present a paper titled Revisiting Mccluskieganj, De-Hyphenating the Anglo-Indian Consciousness through Vikas Kumar Jha'S novel. Mccluskieganj extends over 10,000 acres and was established in 1933 when the colonization. Okay. Mccluskieganj extends over 10,000 acres and was established in 1933 when the Colonization Society of India was registered to sell shares in land. Letters from visitors published in the Colonization Observer describe Mccluskieganj as a beautiful, welcoming and homely place. Interestingly, the village with the unusual name of Mccluskieganj is an actual place with an extraordinary history. It was set up in the 1930s in a wave of optimism as a haven for Anglo-Indians who built beautiful bungalows on 10,000 acres of land acquired from a Maharaja. Although the founder, Mr. Mccluskey, died within a year, a remarkable little township sprung from his vision. In this settlement, in the middle of the surrounding jungle, was a Highland guest house run by Mr. Cameron, general stores run by Mr. Roger, and a clubhouse built by Mr. Stout. When independence came in 1947, the inhabitants of Mccluskieganj, being more Indian than British, decided to stay on. Like the television documentary and the novel Mccluskieganj, many of the articles are structured as narratives of return or discovery, portraying the settlement as an uncanny reminder of an imperial past. The current residents of Mccluskieganj feature not only in newspaper article and in the documentary, but also as named characters in Vikas Kumar Jha'S novel. Vikas Kumar Jha is a journalist and a writer. The village Mccluskieganj was the inspiration for this Hindi novel, which was translated into English by Mahasweta Ghosh in 2015. Many years ago, he had heard about Mccluskieganj being the only Anglo-Indian village in the world, situated in Chota Nagpur area, Bihar. When he reached Mccluskieganj and met its people, their life enshrined him. Its hills and lakes, the village bungalow, the rooted Anglo-Indians and tribals coexisting with each other, their love for their motherland, everything touched the writer in him. This village is the paradigm of collective memory and productive nostalgia. It was filled with memories, hope and pounding hearts looking for their identity. The village was a magical portrait in the realistic world. Vikas Kumar Jha'S novel Mccluskieganj, the story of the only Anglo-Indian village in India, has an episodic structure, like a collection of short stories. For example, the jockey Douglas Gibson, who leaves the trains of the big city race course behind the set up a stud farm in Mccluskieganj. The venture fails badly and Gibson takes to gambling. His wife gets fed up and goes to live with their daughter in Australia. Alone in Mccluskieganj, the elderly Gibson enters into a platonic relationship with a tribal girl, Parvati, young enough to be his granddaughter, and adopts a baby elephant. Mccluskieganj is overflowing with such odd character and their curious lives. The gastric problem of the Gordon family, the village alcoholic Mr. Warden, who loses his bungalow and ends up sleeping in coffee. Settlement at Mccluskieganj was an attempt to liberate Anglo-Indians both from British patronage and from Indianization. Ernest Timothy Mccluskey, as an Anglo-Indian from Calcutta, born to an Irish father and an Indian mother, came up with the idea of homeland after his request for free land was refused by the British government in London, New Delhi, in states including Bengal and Assam. And after his offer to pay the market price for two sites in the United Province was declined, Mccluskieganj reported that two independent Indian states offer us Indian states offered us excellent land at most favorable terms, but these negotiations had to be dropped for political reasons. An astute businessman, he managed to convince Raja Ratu of Chota Nagpur Plateau to lease out 10,000 acres of land, about 60 kilometers from Ranchi. Based on Mccluskey's plan, a cooperative called Colonization Society was formed in 1933. In Hong Kong, Robin McGon, main character of the novel Mccluskieganj, grows up listening to his father Dennis speaking wistfully about the settlement of Mccluskieganj. Quote, on 13th October 1933, this land was registered as a permanent property lease. Mr. Mccluskey called upon the service of his good friend Dr. Henry Gidney and Mr. A.S. Bower to see this deed through. This proposal was also intimated to Viceroy Lord Irwin. Finally, with the help of Colonization Society of India, Mr. Mccluskey made his dream come true in the year 1934. Unquote. In 1934, an editorial in the Colonization Observer explained the three main aims of Mccluskey's scheme. First, our community being the only homeless one in this vast subcontinent are firstly colonizing with the express object of establishing a home for itself, secondly of securing a definite stake in our country, thereby becoming Indians proper without losing our identity as Anglo-Indian, and lastly by getting together we automatically open up fresh avenues of employment for the future generation who will grow up in the colony and become practical farmer in due course. This has been brilliantly portrayed in the novel Mccluskieganj, when Dennis McGon remembers that original concept of Mccluskieganj was to become as goddess of agriculture. He quote, our views will become gospel and our example the theme for the whole India. Anglo-Indian community shall supply the joys, not to its song of emancipation. Unquote. Mr. Mccluskey proved that Anglo-Indian community could carve a niche for itself. Dennis McGon remembers that even in those days, people referred to Mccluskieganj as Little London. What was so special about the place? It may have been a riddle for outsiders, but the answer was simple. This village was perhaps the only one in the world that had been established as a settlement for the Anglo-Indians. When Anglo-Indians purchased their plot in Mccluskieganj, the local Adivasi felt dismayed and threatened. When Mr. Mccluskey extended his hand to these villagers, assuring them of his community's support, the tribals were suspicious. These innocents could not distinguish between the British and the Anglo-Indians, but the numerous Adivasi tribes of Orans, Mundas and outcast Ganjus mingled freely with the families of the Anglo-Indians, albeit as their worker. Anglo-Indian settlement at Mccluskieganj was termed colonization and represented a paradoxical attempt to create a homeland for Anglo-Indian that was located within, but clearly distinct from the rest of India. In the Jha'S novel, Dennis told to his son Robin, Anglo-Indian didn't have place to go to at all. They belonged nowhere, neither here nor there. Mccluskey thought they should have a native place. They wanted to be in place where they would have their own lifestyle. Dennis McGon remembers that this quote, this was the best place for Anglo-Indians to hibernate themselves. The Anglo-Indians were known as English in those days, so we settled over here. They thought they were in England. They wanted to build house of the same design and live in the same way with the same identity. And it was an isolated space. Anglo-Indians didn't have many places to go to. They wanted a homeland, they wanted a place where they could all live, where they could have their own identity. They found that they had a nice part in India. There was peace and harmony, and we were from the freedom movement. It was an escape from the rest of India. Robin decides go back, find his roots, and write a novel on Mccluskieganj. In an interview with Vikas Jha'S told, I could relate to the rising as many a times in my own life. I too have risen from ashes. The faith in survival and fighting for your identity, what connects me to this village. This novel marked a new beginning for me, and the renewal it set off in my life hasn't stopped till date. Many a time they address me by the name of Robin, the main character of my novel. Mccluskieganj was imagined as a place of safety away from the independence movement and from life in large cities such as Calcutta, and as place of liberation both from British patronage, from increasing competition with Indian for employment. As a visitor, wrote later in Colonizer in 1934, a nostalgic desire for home at Mccluskey was oriented towards the present and the future rather than consigned to an imagined past. Mccluskieganj had benefited in recent years from development projects initiated by two Anglo-Indian politicians. In negotiation with the Congress party before and after independence, Frank Anthony, the president of the All India Anglo-Indian Association, secured 2 seats for nominated members of the Lok Sabha, the lower house of parliament in the central government, and for nominated members of the various state legislatures including West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka and Bihar. In the novel, Mccluskieganj, Mr. Mendes told to Ramin that Dr. Henry Gidney and Mr. Frank Anthony were two leaders of Anglo-Indian community. They had convinced Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister, that the Anglo-Indian all fairness should be represented, both in Parliament as well as the state assemblies. As a result, Pandit Nehru incorporated Mr. Anthony's proposal in Article 79 of the Constitution of India, whereby one member of this community would be nominated to every state assembly and two would be nominated to the Lok Sabha. Jha shared the memories of Anglo-Indians through the Mccluskieganj. When Dennis McGowan returns from Mccluskieganj after the death of his father, he thought, quote, "In just half an hour, I will have said goodbye to all these wonderful, loving people of my beautiful village. But can I ever forget Mccluskieganj?" Dennis did not look back. How could he? His eyes were blurred, but not so the memory he carried with him of Mccluskieganj. Dennis also said, this quote, "This is a matter of one's root. When they weaken, every moment become a burden." In his novel, Jha presents the feelings of Miss Bonner. The most distressing factor that troubled from time to time was why the very Anglo-Indians for whom E.T. Mccluskey had moved mountain and earth should have started an exodus. The success of Mccluskieganj was short-lived. A number of factors contributed to its decline. Mccluskey died in 1935. Anglo-Indians were largely urban population with little experience of agriculture work, and there was a lack of other jobs and services such as school and hospital. But the main reason for its decline was the migration of Anglo-Indian, particularly after Indian independence in 1947. Despite attempts by the All India Anglo-Indian Association to encourage Anglo-Indians to stay in India and to view India as their home, an estimated 1/3 of Anglo-Indians migrated after independence, first to Britain and Canada, since the early 19th century to Australia, feeling discrimination, unemployment, and the difficulties of surviving as a small Christian and English-speaking minority community. Many families at Mccluskieganj left their properties to their servants, and many of the original houses are now in ruins. Most of its characters are real, while some are imaginary. In the novel Mccluskieganj, Lisa said to her husband Dennis about migration, "How long will you hang on to memories?" She would snap. "The anchor of man lies within him. When does a man leave his home to seek another one elsewhere? Have you ever thought about that? It is the hope for a new future that propels one to migrate. Migration signifies hope. Try to understand, man. This nostalgia is killing. It's making you depressive. It makes me weary too. I'm getting sick of it. Just shut up, Dennis. Let me live in peace. To hell with Mccluskieganj." Today, there are about 20 Anglo-Indian families in Mccluskieganj. Some are descendants of the first settler in the early 1930s, whereas others have retired there more recently, partly because land and property are cheaper than elsewhere. The memories are countless. Every day, Mccluskieganj was a story in itself. The people, the house, the nature, the lanes, the colonial imprints, the fascinating anecdotes, the innumerable random faces, their choices, their struggles, fill me with so many memories, like an old trunk filled with beautiful memories. Mccluskieganj remains a potent site of memory for Anglo-Indian residents and their descendants in the settlement, elsewhere in India, and across a wider diaspora. The dream for independence put into practice at Mccluskieganj is remembered in different ways, which range from the dismissal of the settlement as failure and folly to the celebration of its spirit of independence and adventure. Vikas Kumar Jha'S shared their dreams, stories, their hope through the novel Mccluskieganj. Kitty Memsab, the Anglo-Indian lady who sold fruits at the station, is another significant character among many more in his novel. She was born in the settlement rather than objectify Kitty Taxiria as a woman who embodies the decline not only of Mccluskieganj but also of the Anglo-Indian community more widely. Ian Jack described her working at the station, quote, she was preparing a basket for orange for the evening train and joking in Hindi with the bravest of country liquor. She seemed to have made her peace, perhaps not with India, which is too large and complicated an idea, but at least with that small part of it where she was born, unquote. Jha's first encounter with Kitty Mem Sahab at the station when she was excited to respond his query saying, everybody knows me. If you want to ask about me, go ask Queen Victoria and Lord Curzon. He has mentioned it in the novel where Robin meets Kitty for the first time. Kitty Taxeria is pictured wearing a sari, living in poverty and selling fruit at the railway station to survive. According to Dilip Bob and Farzan Ahmed, she is an eloquent and emaciated symbol of all that went wrong with Mccluskieganj, whereas publicity for the novel Mccluskieganj stated that she symbolized a compromise among the contradiction of the Anglo-Indian community. Anglo-Indian drank only among themselves, keeping the locals away. Ultimately, the wall between them gradually fell. This resulted in a kind of free mixing of Mundas, Oraon, Gansu, and Ahis with the Anglo-Indian Sahib. Although the effect was one of conviviality, it resulted in some not such happy unions. Mr. Meredith married an Adivasi girl. Mr. Sirard married the Adivasi nanny of his children, his wife being dead. This was Somri, who was not exceptional to look at, then married daughter of R.G. Sparks, married Ram Sevak, who was a Sahu, that is of the Baniya caste. This was opposed by both families. Yet these marriages were solemnized. Some of these weddings were good in some ways, with the result that the feeling of inferiority and superiority took a back seat and prejudice got ironed out. I'm going to conclude. Anglo-Indian homemaking at Mccluskieganj was complex. Anglo-Indians sought a racial exclusive homeland, although this was never achieved because of their employment of Anglo-Indian servants by comparing settlement at Mccluskieganj with British settlement in Australia, New Zealand, Canada. And the colonized society of India not only invoked an imperial heritage of white colonization and settlement, but also provided a model for India to gain dominion state within a wider empire. And yet the productive nostalgia enacted at Mccluskieganj also revealed a yearning for both India and Britain as a home. According to Blunt, spatial narratives of memory have become increasingly important as shown by work on sites and landscape of memory nostalgia, which invoke home in its very meaning. It remains a largely temporal narrative rather than a spatial one. A significant consequence of this is that spaces of home disappear at the moment that they are invoked and remain located in the past rather than in the present. Mccluskieganj, in the novel Mccluskieganj, people like Dennis had left Mccluskieganj under the compulsion, but all life long they struggled with its haunting memories. Mr. Miller said to Robin, Mccluskieganj was a strange concept. It succeeded as long as people were committed to it. It can succeed still if we renew the commitment. Yes, everything is possible, but our lives are already wrecked. The few of us left here are old and just binding time. If there is dedication, everything is possible, but places are not made for rubble. Once this crop consisting of people like us pass away, all that will be left are memories, a graveyard of Mr. Mccluskieganj's dream, the end of a cursed race. But Robin thought to reply him that never speak of our race as a cursed, uncle, but he couldn't reply. He decided that he would remain here. A rare sense of satisfaction filled him. Mr. Miller said to Robin, what is tragic is our own community too had abandoned us as if to say, since you choose to miss the bus, stay back and fend yourself. Perhaps the year ahead will enable our children to join the mainstream Indian life and integrate themselves into it. This is not actually a novel at all, but a biography of only Anglo-Indian village in India. Thank you.